Welcome to Law Subscribed. This is your dedicated news source for all things subscriptions in the law. My name is Matthew Kurbis. I'm the subscription attorney, and I believe subscriptions can help bridge the access to justice gap and incentivize attorneys to modernize and scale their practice like never before. On this show, I interview lawyers ditching the billable hour and experts who can help attorneys move beyond billing time. Thanks to my sponsors, 650 and Gavel. Links to both in the show notes. More on them later, and use the code LAWSUBSCRIBED when signing up. You get 10% off, and it supports the show. The best way to support the show is to share it with someone you know. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and nothing said is legal, ethical, or financial advice. Without further delay, here's the episode. I'm thrilled to have with me today on the Law Subscribed podcast, Ben Schorr. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Well, I'm glad we finally made it on post-ABA Tech Show, but just in case my listeners haven't heard you before, there are some great other podcasts that you've guested on that we could link to in the show notes. But in case they haven't listened to those yet, go ahead and give yourself a little introduction.
Sure. So I'm, as mentioned, Ben Schorr. I've got a pretty long background in legal tech. I started my tech career way back in the 1980s when I was in-house at a law firm in Los Angeles as their systems administrator. I spent a couple years there and then went into private consulting where most of my clients were lawyers. I was doing technical consulting for them and did that for about 6 years or so. And then I got approached by a law firm in Honolulu who wanted me to come be their director of information services. And I said, wait, Honolulu? Yes, I'm in. So I packed my bags and sold my firm, my consulting firm, and then went to Hawaii and spent about 9 years in-house as the director of information services for one of the big law firms in Honolulu before I was once again lured back into private consulting. And after quite a few years of that, I got a message on LinkedIn, actually, from a recruiter at Microsoft. I had worked with Microsoft for many, many years, 20 years plus, fairly closely. And this recruiter said, we've got a role that you might be great for. Are you interested? And I said, yeah, sure. And we talked a bit, and I went through a number of challenging interviews. And the next thing I know, my wife and I are packing our bags and moving to Redmond, Washington. So here we are in Redmond, and I'm here at Microsoft. And I'm a senior content project manager here at Microsoft. And so that means that my job is explaining technical stuff to non-technical people. And I work in a group called Customer Success Engineering. So it's not my job to sell our products. It's my job to help our customers be successful with our products. So that's what I do every day.
Well, coming from consulting with law firms on technology, I mean, every law firm, whether they want to or not, is using Microsoft's products in one way or another, right? So it's a natural fit, in other words, where you
That is
right?
always a challenge I have here when I talk to our marketing folks about like getting some money to do a booth at a conference or something, a legal tech conference, because they always say, well, okay, yeah, we could maybe do that. What's our expected return? You know, what are we talking about at the conference? And eventually they get around to the question of, what's our opportunity? And I have to admit to them that 98% of the people there are already our customers. And then they say, well, what are we doing?
And even if they're not customers yet, if they want to use any of the cool software that has an API with like Microsoft Word, like your Spellbooks, for example, or Gavel, which is a sponsor of the pod, and Spellbook's been on guests on the pod, they integrate with Word, and that's how you really leverage these legal tech tools. And so if you're not a Microsoft subscriber and you want to use these tools, you have to get the Microsoft stuff. That's what you got to do. So
I've tried to make the argument that legal tech is still a great opportunity for us and a great set of customers, and they nod, but at the end of the day.
Well, and it's already sacrilegious. I'm having you not use Teams but Zoom to record this. And then I'll just put myself out there. I do subscribe to Google Workspace as my primary software that I'm using for that, but that's also because
I'm going through a tunnel.
Oh no! The podcast is ending early. But of course, I'm also using Microsoft products because other lawyers are using Microsoft products. So even if I do prefer personally to be in Google Workspace, first of all, Google has its failings. Obviously, there's no product that's perfect, but I'm using both. So at the end of the day, I am ultimately using both, and some of the incredible legal tech products that are out there only work with Microsoft Word, and I want to use them. And so there you are. But and some of my clients that I'm fractional GC for, they're in I have their email. I have an email address with them, and I'm in Teams with them and SharePoint and all that stuff. So I mean, I'm using Microsoft products all the time.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, I'm a pretty good user, but I will tell you, I've attended some, and none that have been presented by you in particular, Ben, but maybe some people on your team, of like how to like actually use all the features. It's very much 80-20 rule for me. Like I'm only using like 20% of like what's capable in all these tools.
Most customers are, in fact, most people are. one of my productivity tips for Office is to use the quick access toolbar where you can tag features you use a lot. Because honestly, most people, myself included, use the same 10 or 12 features, pretty often and use everything else pretty sparingly. And so I tag those 10 or 12 features that are in Word or Excel, PowerPoint, whatever they are, and put them on my quick access toolbar. And then I minimize my ribbon so that what I have across the top is the tabs from the ribbon and my quick access toolbar, which is a very nice, minimal, efficient interface. And on those occasions when I need one of the other functions, I just click the tab and there they are. But I'm one click or even a keystroke away from the 10 or 12 features I use all the time. And that works great.
Yeah. And I will say one more, just to establish my bona fides, if you will, on Microsoft is, well, I am an all Mac and Apple iPhone person in a lot of ways. My portable is the Surface Pro X, which to this day, the Pro X, mind you, the first ARM architecture one is, I still think personally, my favorite form factor out of any mobile device, still to this day, like mobile computing device. It's beautiful. It's tiny. It's small. The bezel is very thin. It's getting a little slow because I think it's like 2019 I got it. So it might be time for an upgrade soon, but still just love that machine.
Yeah. I'm talking to you right now on a Surface Laptop Studio 2, which is a pretty nice laptop. One of the things I really enjoy about it is you can tilt the screen into like a drafting table, like architect drafting table mode, because I use the ink capability all the time. And we have this, you see sick here, watching on video, but so we've got this pen, which I realize those of you who are listening on audio only, is you don't see what I'm holding up, but it's the Surface Pen, the slim pen, because if you've ever used our other pen, the old one, the old round silver pen, the tips would bend really easily on it and it would get hard to ink. But this one, the pen the tip is basically solid. And so it inks beautifully. And so I show up at meetings with my Surface Laptop Studio 2, put it in drafting mode, or even lay it flat and ink all my notes with this. It's fantastic.
Yeah, since I have the Pro X, I think I got the alpha version of that pen, which I still have to this day. It's the thin one. It's got a nice form factor as well. And while I'm a typer for my notes, but I use 3D Paint. I used to use 3D Paint a lot more. But now I'm a Canva subscriber. But before then, I was using that thing in 3D Paint all the time to make stuff. So I'm not very artistic, but it was easy with that tool.
I read some studies on the benefits of ink versus typing neurologically when you're taking notes, and that at least in theory, the physical act of writing the note in a few different ways enhances your recollection, your absorption of the material. And I don't know, I'm not smart enough to understand how all that works, but I thought I'd try it and see if it helped. And I like it. I like the experience. I like being able to highlight, just tap something and highlight in different colors and ink in different colors even very quickly. And I don't know, I've just sort of enjoyed the experience. Whether it's actually helping me be better at note taking or not, I'm not totally sure, but it might be. Plus, it lets me, diagram stuff very quickly and easily, which is harder to do with the keyboard. So I'm pretty sold on the ink. The other thing that I read, which is an interesting side benefit, was when you're working on your laptop and it's in a standard laptop configuration, like mine is right now. In fact, when you're meeting somebody face to face, you've got that laptop screen between you and them, and it forms a little bit of a physical barrier. And that when you lay the screen down flat and ink, or if you're just using paper notes, it'd be the same thing. You don't have that physical barrier between you and them, and there's some social connection advantage to that. Again, I'm not smart enough to understand.
Interesting. No, it's all interesting. So for those of you who want to see the pen that Ben was talking about, this is your episodic reminder to go to the Substack and www.lawsubscribe.com. Subscribe. You can watch the videos if you subscribe to the Substack newsletter. So getting into like why you're here is AI is launching all of the, has launched all these AI products. They've a large investor in OpenAI and integrating that everywhere, GPT-4 and 4 Turbo, and all throughout the Microsoft products. Now, of course, I'm a solo, so I don't necessarily have access to like Copilot and stuff because it's just me. I'm not like, you don't have to be like large. I mean, I don't know. Based on the look you're giving me, maybe there's something that I don't know. But before we even get there, though, still coming off your background, you were doing a lot of consulting. Were you billing your time? How was it that you made money when you were doing that?
Oh, fascinating and perfect question for this podcast. So initially, yes. Now, keep in mind, I started consulting in early 1990s. And so back then, that's how you did it. You built the time, you built the hours. We did a little bit of project work, but for the most part, it was all hourly. Later in my career, however, we did a lot of interesting things around billing, including we made a pretty strong move towards what we call value-based billing. I know that's a pretty common term in law too, where we were flat fee billing projects. And we found a couple of things with that were pretty interesting. One is that flat fee billing aligns your interests with the customers because they want it done quickly and you want it done quickly. And so, whereas with hourly billing, there's always that conflict of, is he just dragging this out so he can bill me for another half hour? We don't know. But with the flat fee, the value-based billing, you don't have that problem. The other nice thing with it is we still tracked our hours, but we were tracking them for the purpose of improving our efficiency. But we didn't have to report hours to the client. So our bills became much simpler. We also did something that was borderline crazy. And I don't know if I recommend this to your clients, but it worked well for us. And that is, we actually experimented in pay what you think it was worth billing, which is we'd go into the project and we'd say, okay, here's what we're going to do. And here's what you're going to do. Here is our quote for this. Here's our value-based billing. At the end of the project, we're going to send you an invoice for this amount. You pay us what you think the project was actually worth. And when I told this to my partner, he wanted to have me committed because he thought this was insane. I said, let's try it. And in the 18 months or so that we did it, and we did do it on every project. We kind of experimented a little bit. But in the 18 months or so that we did it, and we did it on dozens of projects, we only once had a customer pay us less than the invoice. And it wasn't a lot less, but they paid us a little bit less. And then we had several occasions, 4 or 5 occasions, where the customer paid us more than was on the invoice because they were so happy with the work. They said, we think you've actually underbilled us here. And they paid us a little bit more. They got to throw a tip on, I guess you could say, which was nice. When we told this to clients, they thought we were crazy too, but they also recognized that it meant we were really confident in the quality of the work we were going to do, because if we did shoddy work for them, they could pay us nothing, right? And that's good. That's not good, but it's not that we're going to argue about it because we've agreed ahead of time they were going to pay us what they thought it was worth. So anyway, we dabbled in that. If I had stayed with the firm, I sold my interest in the firm when I worked here. I don't know if the firm's still doing that. I kind of hope they are. But if I were ever to go back into consulting, probably try that again. I think it was an interesting approach, certainly. It took value-based billing to the next level, that's for sure. We never lost a bid, by the way, when we put that on the proposal. We won every bid we proposed when we put that in. So it's a little side benefit.
And in particular, if you're a lawyer competing with institutional clients in that space, that's the first time that's been talked about on Law Subscribed. And of course, at the time of recording, this is like my 90-something interview, even though we're only 60-something live. So in all my episodes so far, that's the first one that's ever brought that up. And I think that's a really interesting way to stand out. And just like the subscription model, what it does is it does let the customer or client choose, right? Because you could choose at what level you're subscribed. You could choose what you're paying, and giving that customer or client choice gives them the power and gives them a good feeling about the relationship that you're going to have.
Yeah. And we did do a post-mortem, so to speak, with the client afterwards to find out, why did you pay us what you paid us, right? And that was especially important for the one customer who paid us less than we'd invoiced. Is this just a matter that the customer is a jerk and taking advantage of us, or do they have a legitimate concern that's reflected in their payment? In that case, it was a little bit of both, to be honest. But at that point, we can choose whether we want to do work with them or not in the future, right? I mean, if they're going to underpay the invoice, if it's a one-off because we didn't live up to our quality standards, then okay, that's on us. We need to fix that and do better.
Right.
And we're happy to work with that customer again if they have a fair concern that it's reflected. If, on the other hand, we get the sense that, now they're just taking advantage, then we can just decline to work with them in the future. Okay, that happened. But like I said, we had one person who paid under, and, their concerns were not totally unfounded.
Yeah.
And they didn't pay much under. They paid like 20% under or something. I don't remember now exactly.
Yeah, I know. It's a really interesting approach. And I think that, what it does is, if you're doing important work for the client and they want you to be happy and continue to do work for the client, they're not going to underpay you, first of all, typically, unless, this one outlier situation. And it gives you an indication if you need to raise your pricing on a value-based price, because maybe the value you're providing is higher than you maybe thought. And now for all your other clients, you could maybe increase your pricing reasonably because you know that there's more value there. And while it's not like perfectly analogous to the subscription model for like month-to-month pricing, there is it's a similar push and pull, because if they're not taking advantage of their subscriber benefits per month, then they may unsubscribe. And if you want to keep them subscribed, you have to make sure you're providing them with that value, those subscriber benefits. It's more of like on a month-to-month basis, if that's your subscription there. But I think there's some overlap there, but it's a really interesting model. I wonder if there's like just to apply to the subscription model, subscribe at what you want per month type pricing. I don't know. We'll play around with it.
Maybe. The other thing we did with the value-based billing, we did do some subscriber model work too, where we had customers come on and we were basically a managed service provider for them and they were paying us X dollars a month. We tried something there that did not work as well, which is that we tried a model where we were going to be their managed service provider and they were going to pay us a flat rate per month. And that we didn't put many restrictions on that. I mean, it was for services only. We were going to put hardware in for free basically. But we didn't put enough restrictions on that. And the theory going in was when they first bring us in, they have a lot of needs. They have a lot of problems, right? We'll come in, we may be working a lot of hours with our flat rate, works out to be a pretty low hourly rate, but we're going to get all those problems smoothed out. Then they're going to be a relatively easy customer, but still at the previous rate. And so we kind of make it up on the back end, right? Because we make it up when things get easy and comfortable, and now it's all good. And again, the theory being this aligned with our interest with the customer's interest. They want the problem solved quickly. We benefit more the sooner we get everything working great. The problem was we did have customers who took advantage of that. And what they did is they'd bring us in, we'd do a whole bunch of work on the front end, and a year down the road, when everything's working great, they'd cancel us. Mm-hmm. And so we never had the opportunity to make it up on the back end because they were just, hey, everything's working well. We don't need you anymore.
Right.
So we didn't think that through. We didn't anticipate that.
Well, it was early days for like professional services using that kind of a model. And, nowadays, I think like the practice areas that I go to are like litigation or even like estate planning where, you have there's always going to be more work up front. And so one of the ways that you could handle that we've been seeing some lawyers handle that is it's like a flat fee and subscription hybrid model, right? There's an initial payment made, and then there's more of like a maintenance plan kind of a thing, subscription post, the bulk of the work being done. And that's a way to
have been more successful if we had done something like that. Or if we had put in some sort of thing that said, we're going to do this many hours at this rate, and then anything above that, there would be some extra charge of some sort. If we had done something like that, might have helped. Because we found ourselves putting in close to full-time work at some of these clients, and we got brought into a medical center to help them, and we probably were putting in 50 or 60 theoretically billable hours a week in there for several months. And then they were one of the customers who stepped out once everything was working great. It's like,
right.
Okay. So we probably lost a lot of money on that project just because we didn't think that through very clearly. We gave them too many hours at that flat rate early and didn't think about that.
And that may have been true at the time, but like in this, to pivot back to why I'm having you here today, in the world of Gen AI and efficiencies at the level that they're at now, like the relationship between time and money really becomes inverse because you're spending so many fewer hours on things that tracking time even, like you talked about tracking time but not reporting it, which made that less of a lift. And nowadays there's so many passive time tracking tools that you don't even have to necessarily manually track your time anymore. It'll just be passively tracked if you don't have to report it to the clients. But I still feel like that has diminishing returns in the Gen AI world that we live in today, because things that used to take hours and hours and hours or days and days can now take, minutes or a day. So tell me now, Ben, more about some of these AI tools that I'm sure my listeners have maybe heard about that Microsoft's offering, but give us more of just like an overview.
Yeah. So, obviously our big one here is Copilot. There's Copilot for Microsoft 365, which is what business customers should be using that they can add on to and to your earlier point, we did initially when we launched Copilot for Microsoft 365, we had a 300 seat minimum. So you had to buy at least 300 seats. Obviously for solo and small firms, that's not going to happen because you don't have 300 seats. But in January, we dropped that. So now anybody can buy, you can even buy one license of Copilot if you want to. There's no limit on that. We also introduced a consumer version of Copilot, which we named Copilot Pro. And so Copilot Pro is the consumer version, and Copilot for Microsoft 365 is the one for businesses, which is obviously the law firm should be looking at. So Copilot is a productivity AI. It's built in, if it's not already in every product we make, it's coming. But it's certainly in all the products that lawyers typically use. It's in Word, Outlook, Excel, PowerPoint, et cetera, OneNote, and many, many other things. And it's really powerful for accelerating your productivity on certain tasks. And, I kind of joked earlier about, is this the end of lawyers? And our company president, Brad Smith, who's a lawyer himself, by the way, I'm not sure if you knew that, but Brad likes to say, we named it Copilot for a reason, right? Not autopilot, it's Copilot. It's here to work alongside you, not instead of you. Right? And it does that beautifully, because honestly, you should never, ever take anything a generative AI creates and show it to a client or the court without reviewing it first. I mean, never. We've seen now a sad string of high-profile cases where some attorney somewhere took a shortcut, generated something with Gen AI, and then submitted it to the court and found out that, some of it was not factual. As far as I know, none of that has happened with Copilot, but that doesn't mean it couldn't. So yeah, it's super important with Gen AI to use it and try it and enjoy the benefits of it, but also review it. Don't. I've often said treat it like a first year legal intern. Give it clear instructions of what you want it to do, and then review what it puts out. And
I found that it has maybe the wisdom of an intern, but it has the capacity of a 5-year associate.
That might be true. The thing with Copilot is, some of our early access preview members who are people who are using Copilot early on, when we ask them, they report that they're saving, 30 to 60 minutes a day, probably with Copilot. That's their estimate. And that's not bad. And that's for people who are just dipping their toes in, right? They've only been using it for weeks. They haven't learned all the tricks yet. They're always learning something new. And the other thing that's interesting with Copilot, and really all generative AIs, is that the models are continually getting better, right? So if it's saving you 45 minutes today, it might be saving you 50 minutes next week. It might be saving you an hour the week after that. Who knows where it's going to go. But the models are continuing getting better, but also the users are continually getting better because you're learning new tricks. You're reading some article that inspires you to try some new approach. And that's powerful. The other thing that's really interesting about Gen AI that I think makes it especially applicable to a broader range of users is that the interface is natural language. You don't have to learn some mystical syntax, right? You can just talk to it in English. I even, just as an experiment, gave Copilot a prompt in the worst, English I could think of, right? Sort of typical, like misspellings, grammatically incorrect. I think I even started it with like yo dog or something, right? I mean, I just completely deliberately do that. And it still worked, I think you could probably talk to it like a pirate and it would work. I mean, it doesn't matter. And so I think that makes it so much more approachable once people get over the initial apprehension about typing into the box and what's it going to do, right? Try it, see what it does. Worst, and the other thing I like to remind people is that the AI doesn't get impatient, doesn't get bored. Right? Keep trying stuff. Right. It's not judging you.
Right. And so you were talking about earlier about how like the quick access toolbar, right? And like there's all these efficiencies that if like you learn the ins and outs of all the tools available to you in the Microsoft products, that's reducing a lot of non-billable time. Yep. But this 30 to 60 minutes, this Gen AI stuff, this analysis, this getting to the end result faster, now we're in this space of, okay, this is probably eliminating a lot of non-billable time, but we're also now dipping our toes into, yes, this is going to get rid of billable time. So when lawyers come to you and they have fears about that, what's your response?
I mean, it's honestly just another, I hate to use the term nail in the coffin because that's it's morbid and it's also overused a bit. But, I've been, even as I was mentioning, I've been an advocate of value-based billing, flat rate billing, however you want to call it, for a long time. And I think this is just another good argument in favor of moving away from the billable hour whenever you can. Honestly, even without the AI, value-based billing has the potential. If you do it right, it's so much more profitable. It just really is. We used to have projects that we could do where we knew we could do 5 of these projects in 3 days, right? If we build that by the hour, we wouldn't be making very much. But if we build it with value-based billing, we're making a lot. I mean, our effective billable rate was sometimes over $1,000 an hour, just because we could do the project so quickly, but it was an immensely valuable task to the customer. And so the same thing's going to happen to lawyers with the billable hour. It already has really in many areas, where you can be so much more profitable with a flat rate. And now AI just accelerates that tremendously. The reason we were tracking time internally was to try to get every piece of efficiency we could, look for opportunities where we could save time to make ourselves more efficient, more profitable. With AI, I mean, that's just going to squeeze those inefficiencies tremendously.
When I went solo, I pivoted from mostly litigation to a transactional-only practice. I did not have a database of documents to automate. That's why a business and employment legal document database and automation tool like 650 is super useful. I can rely on the quality of the documents in 650's database since they're putting excellent legal minds to work curating and updating their documents and automations over time. When you're not billing by the hour, outsourcing and efficiency matters, and 650 can help you scale your practice to get high-quality documents drafted in less time. Use the code LAWSUBSCRIBED at 650 650.com, and when being onboarded to get 10% off. If you're not a business and employment attorney, or you have your own documents that you'd prefer to use, then my next sponsor, Gavel, is the automation tool for you. Gavel allows you to build shareable, client-facing workflow and document automations. In other words, Gavel helps you create a legal practice where attorneys can monetize the value they bring clients in productized form and scale via subscriptions and flat fees. Use the code LAWSUBSCRIBED at gavel.io to get 10% off an annual subscription. There's no one right way to automate and scale your practice, but with one or both of my sponsors, 650 and Gavel, you can take your subscription law firm to the next level. Links to both in the show notes. Now back to the show. Right. And I think the tracking time thing, when you said you were making $1,000 an hour, you knew that because you were still tracking your hours. And eventually you're going to be making so much an hour, it's like it's not even going to be a thing you're thinking about. In my tech show presentation, I'm curious to hear a little bit about yours because it's related to what we're talking about today. But we gave the example of if you were doing a 10-hour task at $500 an hour, that's a $5,000 task, right? That's a $5,000 product. But now if that 10 hours becomes 10 minutes because of Gen AI and other efficiencies that are introduced for actual billable work, now that's 0.2, right? So you have to 50x your rate. And your effective rate would be $25,000 an hour for that task. So in the way that, so reframing that into what you put it, like you don't need to be tracking your time anymore, even at that point. Because if you're getting the same result with incredible quality work at the same, level, but in such little time, okay, so now you're making $25,000 an hour. If you value-based price your thing, you could stop tracking your time. Would you agree with that?
Well, I don't know. I'm a perfectionist. So to me, I'd probably still do it because I want to get it from point 2 to point 1. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly less important at that point because, and honestly, again, because you're not reporting it to the client, if you decide not to track the time, well, it's just your own internal processes you're playing with. So it's up to you. But yeah, I mean, my nature is I'm always continual improvement guy. So I'm always looking for ways we can make it better. We can do the job with higher quality and at less time. That's just me though.
Yeah, but it's the inverse relationship I think is really important, that what you said, right? It's like it doesn't become how much more time can I bill on this project. It's how could I spend less time on this project?
Yes, and at the same quality or even better quality. Yes, definitely. If you want the customer to come back, it's no good for them to. Well, it's not as good for them to pay you the $5,000 for point 2 if they never use you again because they didn't like the work. You really want them to keep coming back to you because they loved the work and want to keep paying you $5,000 for point 2.
And if this, listeners, if this is your first episode and this just sounds like crazy talk to you because you're a billable hour attorney, you're gonna need to listen to some more episodes because I promise you this makes sense once you get out of the mindset of time equals money.
It really does, and you're force magnifying yourself too at the same time, and your associates and anybody else who's working for you, because now you're not limited to their time because you've only got 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week, just like everybody else, and so your amount of possible billable hours is capped. But your amount of value-based billing, you bill a lot at value-based.
Right. For a long time, you could make more money not billing your time and doing value-based pricing. It's just more obvious than ever in the world that we live in today.
I worked with an attorney who's semi-retired. He basically got to the point where he was only doing about 10 hours of work a week because he was doing value-based billing, and he was making basically what he was making before when he was working 60 hours a week. And he just had chosen, he was in his 50s, he was kind of winding down a little bit, but he was still making the same money, and now he was working part-time basically, which he loved. More time for golf.
And that makes me think about all these poor associates at these big law firms that are working 80 to 100-hour weeks. If once they discover there's another way, I don't know, these big law firms might implode. That's at least my prediction. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's possible. It's possible. Or the big law firms might get smart and decide to leverage that for, try to keep the associates on and figure out how to leverage that profit for themselves. Hopefully, if they're smart, they would.
I know that some of them are looking into it right now, but those are more ops people than the lawyer, the partners themselves, right?
Yeah. Hopefully they get smart.
Yeah.
The AI, we're talking about saving time. I one example of that. There's two examples. One example is I maintain a hobby blog on the side. It has nothing to do with my work. Just something I do occasionally for fun. And I had Copilot in Word write me a blog post a few weeks ago. And it wrote about 6 paragraphs, which is about the length I wanted, maybe, plus or minus a bit. And they were pretty good. Were they perfect? No. I went through, I thought these 3 paragraphs are great. These 2 paragraphs need a little bit of editing, so I did a little bit of editing. I'm going to delete this paragraph and I'm going to add one of my own. Okay, good. And I published. And it took, so the fact that it wasn't perfect doesn't mean that the AI failed, right? The AI took a task that before would have taken me, 45 minutes or an hour to do myself. It made it 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Done. And so, I mean, that's one of the misconceptions I hear about AI is people think, oh, it's going to do everything for me. I'm just going to push a button, it'll do everything. No, it probably won't. What it'll do is quite a bit. And, if it takes, your job it takes somebody that used to take 10 hours and cuts it down to 8 hours, that's still a pretty good savings. It may take a while to get you from 10 hours to point two, but eventually you may get there. But you will get almost certainly get a noticeable improvement. The other thing
Oh,
yeah,
go ahead.
Okay. Well, I was gonna say the other example I have is again with Copilot. I get invited to a lot of meetings, and some of those meetings I don't really need to be there. Some of them are, I get these hour-long meetings that are, where 7 minutes of it really applies to me, right? And in the past, I would sit through these meetings for 53 minutes, probably checking my email in the background, half paying attention, and then the 7 minutes I care about would show up, and I'd listen to that. And it's kind of a big waste of time, to be honest. And so what I started doing, and I talked to my manager about this, and she liked it, so I'm in the clear there, is there's some of those meetings where I've identified that nobody is likely to ask me a question during the meeting. And my presence, I mean, there's 200 people in the meeting. My presence at this meeting is nominal. What I've started doing is not going. And what I do is after the meeting, I open Copilot and I say, summarize this meeting. And it gives me a 3 or 4 paragraph summary of what happened at the meeting. And then I say, the product I work on at Microsoft is called Copilot Lab, by the way. Then I'll say, was Copilot Lab mentioned? And if so, what was said? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Were there any action items for me? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Right. And a few other questions like that. And so what I've done is I've used the AI to take a meeting I used to sit through an hour of, and I'll have a 5 to 15 minute conversation with Copilot about it afterwards and get everything I need out of the meeting. Probably better, in fact, because it's giving me details I might have forgotten or not taken clear notes on. And it's even sometimes calls out things that I might have, zoned out on before because it didn't directly apply to me at the time, or I didn't think so. But afterwards, it caught my interest. I, in fact, had one not too long ago where somebody early in the meeting had talked about something, and it was about customer feedback. And I thought, oh, wait, that's kind of interesting. It doesn't maybe directly apply, but I want to know more about that. And so I asked Copilot, tell me more about what Allison said. And it gave me a few paragraphs of summarizing what Allison said in the meeting. And then I said, did Allison share a slide deck? And she had. And it said, sure, here it is. And it gave me a link to her slides. And so I was able to open that and look at it. And, and then I could, by the way, use Copilot and PowerPoint to ask the slide deck questions too. So that summarization I find is something that attorneys especially are extremely interested in, the ability to be able to take a long document, be able to summarize it. I had an attorney at Tech Show, in fact, who after we went out to dinner on Thursday night said, I'm going to go back to my hotel room and buy Copilot tonight. I'm like, oh, wow. Okay, cool. The next morning he ran up to me in the expo hall. He said, I had to summarize a 300-page medical report for a client. It was brilliant. Like, that's great to hear. That's exactly the kind of use case I think a lot of attorneys are going to get out of it. Some people think Gen AI is just about writing stuff, but the summarizing part might actually be more powerful.
So many questions. Let's go in reverse. So that attorney who used it sounds like a personal injury attorney contingency, maybe not billable hour attorney.
I'm not totally sure what his practice area was.
Okay,
that's possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Apparently he dealt with a lot of medical reports. I know that.
So. And I'll tell you, as a former insurance defense attorney who used to read those things and summarize them and bill many, many hours for that, I would be less excited about a summarization tool.
If you're billing for hours, yeah.
Right. So that's why I think he might be on the personal injury plaintiff side contingency work, because there you want to save as much time as possible as well. For the Copilot summarization of meetings and stuff, because of like you're signed in under your account, does it know who you are, or do you have to prompt it every time to be like, I'm Ben Schorr, I do Copilot Lab. Tell me if there's anything useful for me to know.
It knows who I am to some extent. Currently, it doesn't know that I work whether it knows I work on Copilot Lab or not, I do have to kind of explicitly ask it, was there anything said about Copilot Lab? But I have occasionally asked it questions like, is there anything related to my recent work? The results I get from that are mixed. Sometimes it's pretty good. Sometimes it's not that good. Basically, what it's doing when I say that is it's looking at my recent emails and Teams chats and things like that, and documents I've worked on, and might even be extending to people I've collaborated with inside the company. I'm not so sure about that last part, but it does a so-so job. If I'm more explicit about it, I mean, really being as clear as possible with Gen AI is almost always a good idea. And so I generally ask it, was there anything said about Copilot Lab specifically?
Right. And I'm trying to drive home a point here in a second, which bringing me back to what I wanted to ask you earlier. is, you talked about your blog. How long have you been drafting that blog or writing that blog?
A few years now.
Yeah, and the content of it, you're a subject matter expert,
Yeah, I guess so.
more or less. Like
More or less, yeah.
you know what is or isn't a good blog, post at the end of the
Yeah,
day for
I
you.
hope so. I know what I think is a good blog post. Yeah. Yeah.
So, so you're putting in the prompts, you're analyzing the output, you're the subject matter expert of the blog. You know what you're working on at Microsoft. You're the subject matter expert in you're prompting the AI, you're analyzing the results. Like, this is the thing, like, to go back to your earlier point, if it's Copilot, it's not autopilot. I don't know if it'll ever be fully autopilot. And even if it is, like, even if you're a pilot flying an airplane, you need to know how to do everything if autopilot fails. And so I still feel like lawyers, subject matter experts, we're not going anywhere when we're leveraging these tools. We're just going to do everything so much faster. Am I right?
I think you're exactly right.
Yeah, I think we
Exactly
still
right.
need the subject matter experts
And
for everything.
The other thing, and I said this when I presented at Wisconsin Bar, but the thing that the AI can't do, right, what it can never do, is look your client in the eye, shake their hand, and tell them it's going to be okay, which in a lot of cases is what the client really wants, right? And the AI can't do that. Right? That human judgment, that human empathy, that human connection is something that is unique that the lawyer you can't replace, not with automation. And so lawyers always have that ability and the experience too. I mean, just all of those factors. I would encourage an attorney right now who's worried about AI to use the AI, but double down on the soft skills, double down on that human connection and the relationship building, because that's stuff that the AI can't do very well and probably will never do.
Is Copilot letting people, and forgive me because I haven't had a chance to play around with it yet because I didn't realize it was available as of this year for solos to have. Are you able to like not just summarize and analyze the documents, but could I like use Gen AI to like redraft and rewrite like legal documents if I wanted to?
Yes. Yeah. You can tell it, rewrite this paragraph, rewrite this document. You can tell it. One of my favorite things is suggest ways to rewrite this in a way that's more, and then you could pick your qualifier: professional, casual, persuasive, clearer.
How about, legally speaking, more mutual or more favoring client A versus party B? Is it there yet, or is it not really trained on the legal stuff there yet?
So I haven't tested that, but I don't see why it wouldn't work. So I would definitely try it. If you're an attorney out there who's got Copilot, give it a shot. It probably would work, but I haven't tested it, so I'm not sure.
And that's, go ahead.
Oh, no, no, go ahead.
So that's another question that I had for you is, like, when it's drafting all this stuff, like, we know, I mean, longtime listeners know, people who care about it know, like, OpenAI, like, basically trained its LLM on the whole internet, right? And so was there, like, additional training that went into the Copilot models? So, like, is it drawing from a legal corpus, like case law or contracts or state and federal law, or is it still like it's primarily relying on that OpenAI LLM?
We have added some stuff of our own to OpenAI's stuff. And of course, the other thing is that with Copilot for Microsoft 365, it's also got access to the clients, the customers, what we call the graph, which is basically the documents, emails, Teams chats, sort of all that content that's inside your Microsoft 365. It's got access to that. Now, one qualifier I need to put on this, because attorneys ask me this one all the time, is Copilot is limited the same way the user is limited, right? So as a solo, you always have access to everything in your firm because you're the firm, right? So it wouldn't limit you in any way because you've got that permission. Well, let's say you're in a firm of, a certain number of people, and hopefully you've done a smart job of, different people have different permissions to different files, right? Nobody has access to absolutely everything. Copilot respects the same permissions that the user has. So, if Bob asks Copilot a question about one of Alice's documents, but he doesn't have permission to see that document, Copilot won't answer any questions about that document. So it's not an end run around your permissions. So that's an important thing to clarify. But so to get back to your question, so we do have OpenAI's LLM. We do have some of our own stuff, and then we have the customer's data. We don't have it, but Copilot can see the customer's data also to use that in its responses. So to the extent it can learn legal specific stuff, it probably could draw on some of the customer's material to do that. It's not trained specifically on, that I know of, on large amounts of case law. I'm not quite sure to what extent there is, but I consider Copilot more of a general purpose productivity AI as opposed to a legal specific one. And I often recommend to customers, that AI is not marriage, right? You're not limited to one AI. That's the great thing about it, right? You can have as many AIs as you want, and none of them get mad about it. So,
and you should be using multiple AI, I think.
Yeah, definitely, especially for special purpose tasks. I've had attorneys ask me, should I use Copilot for legal research? And I said, I probably wouldn't. I would probably use a purpose-built legal research AI. I know Lexis has one, Westlaw's got one. There's a few others out there. Whatever your particular one is, try them, see what you think, pick one. But for legal research, I would probably use an AI that is specifically for that purpose because it's trained for that, it's tested for that. That's what it's meant to do. Using Copilot or Claude or Llama or Gemini or ChatGPT or any of these general purpose AIs for legal research is probably not a good idea.
Mm-hmm. Maybe some of the listeners, they've only played with the free tools and maybe they've come across the term context window.
Yep.
Do you run into context window problems with Copilot or not? I shouldn't say, let me rephrase. Does Copilot have any context windows limitations that users should be aware of?
Yeah, everybody has context window limitations. For those of you who don't know, a context window is how much information that the AI can consider at a particular time. So the bigger the context window, the larger the prompt you can throw at it, the larger the if you want to review. For example, if I'm summarizing a document, if my context window is 100,000 tokens, then if the document is bigger than that, the AI can't consider the whole document because it's too big. So like every AI, Copilot does have a context window. I'm trying to think where we are today with our context window. I'd have to look that up, actually. I'm not sure.
Well, it's okay because these are published, a few months out anyway. So, I mean, at the time of publication, it will be probably a larger context window anyway.
Yeah. But it's, I'm sure it should be hard to find if you look it up. But I haven't run into any. I've never hit our context window. I know it's out there, but I've never hit it, so I'm not sure. It certainly is possible to hit it if you feed it too much data. You give it a big enough document or set of documents, and you would hit it. Yeah,
I've got some 600+ page franchise disclosure documents I need analyzed.
You can try it. It might work. It might be okay. Like okay. The attorney the other day told me he did a 300-page medical report and it worked fine. So 600 could work. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and because token doesn't translate to just word or line or something, right? Like so, that's a whole other podcast. That's an AI focused podcast.
Yeah. For simplicity, we often use them interchangeably, but tokens are often subwords. They're often syllables and occasionally multiple words.
Okay. So as we start to wrap up the interview here, anything else that you think my listeners should know about Copilot? And because the vast majority of my listeners are already trying to leverage tech tools to be more efficient in their work because they're not billing their time. So any advice or tips for them, places to go to learn how to leverage Copilot or other automations with Microsoft Word?
Yeah, so we have a site called Copilot Lab. That's what I work on. And Copilot Lab is full of articles and videos. It's all free about how to use Copilot, how to be more effective with Copilot. Some of it is broadly applicable to other generative AI too. And we do have some articles on prompting and how to get started with prompting and how to prompt better, which, we may have written it for Copilot, but there's no reason most of the prompts wouldn't work somewhere else too. And then we also have, as part of Copilot Lab, a growing prompt library of curated sample prompts for all the most of our products that have an AI experience in them right now. And so that can be a really good way to get started too. If you're just not quite sure how to start, sometimes one of those sample prompts might catch your eye. Say, oh, let me try that. And then once you've tried that, that hopefully gets you over the awkwardness of typing something into that box the first time. So I would say Copilot Lab is a good place to start. There's also a lot of really good content just on YouTube. Like anywhere, you got to sometimes take a grain of salt with that. It is occasionally amusing for those of us who work here to see videos or hear other podcasts where they're talking about our products and chuckle over the things they don't quite get right. But for the most part, it's pretty good stuff. And I have gone down the rabbit hole of YouTube watching videos on AI and other things for many hours. And there's a lot of good stuff out there.
Can't you just ask Copilot to summarize those videos for you, Ben?
You can. Well, not Copilot, but YouTube has its own AI now. They can do that. Yeah. So it's and probably most of all, my advice is try it, experiment. Give it a shot. The worst thing that can happen is you get a result that's not that impressive. One of our corporate vice presidents, Jarrett Spataro, once said, and I loved this quote, and so I've used it a few times, that Copilot will often be right and occasionally be usefully wrong. And I love the way you put that because it's true. Most of the time I put something in Copilot and the result I get is good. Is it perfect? Not necessarily, but it's good. But occasionally it gives me a response that's not that good, but it points me in a direction that's useful where I say, oh, okay, I see where you're going here. That's not really what I wanted, but let me try this. And so a lot of times it's great for that. And so my encouragement is just try it, The other use I've found for Copilot that's a great way to get started is brainstorming. You can think of Copilot. I always used to joke that I wanted Jarvis from Iron Man. I wanted that guy. Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted that AI to just sit next to me in my lab and, I could just talk out loud and it would reply and think things through with me. And to some extent, generative AI and Copilot is that. You can ask it, suggest 5 things that are this, suggest, 10 ways to do a thing, right? And 8 of those ways might be dumb or things you already thought of. But if 2 of them are, oh yeah, that's cool. Hey, that was easy, right? So
Yeah.
just give it a try.
I'd like to refer to that as it's directionally helpful, usually.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Directionally helpful.
Yeah. The last question I'd like to ask all my guests, Ben, and first maybe you answer this personally, and then maybe if you have Copilot open, you could ask Copilot. And that is a hot dog a sandwich, and why?
Is a hot dog a sandwich? Gosh, it's funny. I have listened to a number of episodes of your show, and I had told myself I was going to look into that before we got here, just so that I would have an intelligent answer. My personal instinct is to say, yeah, why not? It's meat between bread, right? Sure, it's a sandwich. So let's see what Copilot thinks. I'm going to ask it. Let's see.
Okay.
Is a hot dog a sandwich? And it's thinking about it, and I'm using the Copilot that's built into Bing, by the way.
Okay.
So this is a controversial question that has sparked many debates among food lovers, experts, and dictionaries. There's no definitive answer, as different definitions of a sandwich may lead to different conclusions. Okay, now it's suggesting potential ways to approach the question. Merriam-Webster says a sandwich is 2 or more slices of bread or a split roll having a filling in between. So by that definition, a hot dog seems to be a sandwich. According to the National Hot Dog and Sausage Council, who knew, a hot dog is not a sandwich, but a category of its own. They seem like they would have some gravitas there, being the experts in the field. According to some
more biased in one direction.
Yeah. Now, according to some food historians, a hot dog is a type of sausage roll, which is a pastry that wraps around a sausage, and those are not considered sandwiches. But some people argue that a bun is a type of bread, and so it should be. So it sounds like, and it's going on and on, by the way, giving me legal definitions, giving me it's giving me a very thorough answer here, which is pretty impressive. It doesn't obviously have a definitive answer. But gosh, it's hard to disagree with the National Hot Dog and Sausage Council. I mean,
Well, clearly they didn't have any input on the Webster's dictionary definition.
Apparently not.
So if people wanted to find you, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Yeah, the best way these days is LinkedIn. That's usually where I'm at, Ben Schorr on LinkedIn. I'm the only Ben Schorr at Microsoft, and I'm happy to connect with folks there. But that's pretty much the best way. I'm also on Blue Sky a bit, where I post a mix of business and personal stuff.
The personal blog, do you want to share where if we wanted to subscribe?
Oh, if you're a Columbo fan, look for Just One More Thing, a Columbo blog. It's on WordPress or something. I post to it occasionally. Copilot posts to it occasionally.
Maybe you'll have to figure out Autopilot, Copilot for the blog.
It's funny when I tell people when you're experimenting with generative AI for the first time, one of my tips is ask it a factual question you already know the answer to see how it does. Right, and then you'll get a sense for how likely it is to hallucinate, and how thorough its answers are. The question that I use is Columbo married? And the responses I've gotten from a wide variety of the AIs, I've tried almost all of them, varies pretty broadly. Some of them are laughably bad. Some of them are pretty good. That's a good one. And
a good litmus test.
Yeah,
I do
try
the same
asking
thing.
A couple factual questions you know the answer to.
I'm so glad you said that, because I do the same thing. I don't think we talked about it on the podcast yet, but I have a Warren Act related legal research question that's complicated that I know the answer to, that any new legal research AI tool, I see if it gets it right or not. Yeah. Ben Schorr, thank you so much for coming on Law Subscribed.
Thank you, Matthew. It's great to be here.
And that's our show. Thanks again to 650 and Gavel for being sponsors. The best way for others to discover this show is for you to share it with somebody you think would find value from it. Follow me on LinkedIn, since that's where I'm most active on social media, and click the bell towards the top right of my profile to get notified about all of my posts about this podcast and everything else I think is valuable for you to see. To get in touch, message me on LinkedIn or email kurbis@lawsubscribed.com. All links are in the show notes. Until next time, this is Matthew Kurbis with Law Subscribed.